I'm Jay Taylor with Warren Berkeley, and we welcome you to this episode of All About Books. Warren and I enjoy reading. We enjoy reading books about the Bible, and we want to get people excited about books and especially Bible reading. Warren, we have a guest with us today. Who's with us?
Thanks, Jay. Mark Roberts is with us. Mark is the preacher for the West Side Church of Christ in Irving, Texas. Mark has been my best friend for a long time, going back 15 years or so. We've worked together on a number of different projects through the years. Mark is a high energy guy. He loves to preach and equip people and has a close family, a good dog, lots of coffee, enjoys time with his grandson. And we are here to talk to Mark about reading and books from his experience. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Warren. Thanks for having me on today. I enjoy very much the opportunity to think a little bit about reading and to talk about books. C.S. Lewis once said, "I can never get a cup of tea big enough or a book long enough to suit me." I'll have to substitute a cup of coffee for that sentiment, but I agree with him wholeheartedly. It's a delight to be with you and to talk with some guys who want to talk about reading and books.
Well, Mark, we want to thank you for joining us today. And one of the goals that we have with this program is to encourage young people to develop reading habits.
Jay, you froze up a little bit there. You asked about early reading habits. You want to cut that question again?
Yeah, one of our goals is to encourage young people to develop reading habits. And so tell us about your early reading habits.
Well, I wish my story was a little better. It ends better, but it started poorly. In the first grade, I was reading above my grade level. And so I had gone to the library at school and checked out a chapter book. And the teacher caught me reading this chapter book when we were supposed to be reading those little thin See Jane Run kind of books. And she held that book up in front of the whole class and ridiculed me, said, "We cannot be reading this kind of thing. Whose book is this?" I was in so much trouble. Don't do that again. So that was a rocky start for reading. So then in the second grade, I had this marvelous teacher, Mrs. Eddy. She was so kind and generous and just warm. And she caught me reading those little thin 3-word-a-page books. And she asked me, "Mark, what are you doing? What about these books?" And she was trying to encourage me to step up, to read material that was more challenging and more interesting. And I explained to her that we are not allowed to read those books. Well, she explained to me that that is not how things were going to work in her classroom. And she took me by the hand and led me across the library out of the little kids section over to the chapter books. And she introduced me to the world of reading and encouraged me to stretch myself and to challenge myself to read even above where I was currently reading, that would be good for me. And she helped me find books, and she encouraged me to read and to read all that I could. She just gave me a priceless gift, the love of reading, and I have never gotten over it. In school, I got in trouble all the time because the teacher would be teaching and I would have a book down in my desk and I would be reading something while class was going on. I just love to read, and that's all Mrs. Eddy's fault.
Well, that's great. A lot of the people we've talked to have discussed how teachers have been responsible for getting them to read. And of course, as you preach, reading is part of your work. What would you say to maybe our young preachers who are just starting off, developing good reading habits? What would you say to them?
I believe reading is integral in the work of preaching. In fact, I think sometimes when we see a young guy and, we're trying to evaluate his readiness for the pulpit, maybe we think a lot about speaking skills and what he can do in front of an audience. But one of the key skills for preaching is the ability to read. A fellow who can't read well is going to struggle in preaching because we just read all the time. Of course, we're reading the Bible all the time. That should be obvious to our audiences. But as well, we're reading books about the Bible that help us to understand the Bible and what's going on in the text and how to explain that and apply that to others. Reading is what preachers spend a great deal of their time doing. Solomon said, of the making of books, there is no end. And I would add to that, of the reading of books by preachers, there is no end. So just reading all the time to sharpen yourself and to prepare and to get better and to better understand. And I do think, even with all of that, what would you go, is that work reading? There still needs to be reading for pleasure. I'm always got a couple of books going that will help me unwind and relax a little bit, usually a mystery or something about Theodore Roosevelt. Right now I'm reading The Seven Worlds of Teddy Roosevelt, an amazing book. Teddy read a book or two a day. He was an incredible reader. He read very, very rapidly, but he remembered very much just everything that he read and just encyclopedic knowledge. And so books were super important to him. I'm always reading something about Teddy Roosevelt. Right now I'm rereading the Tony Hillerman Navajo Mystery Series. Really, really enjoy those. I'm on The Sinister Pig. What a great title. I'm about to start David McCullough's book, The Pioneers, which has been highly recommended to me, and I'm excited about starting that. So just reading something in a couple of different directions all the time.
As preachers read books, they're going to be reading books about the New Testament a lot. And as you go through the New Testament, there are a couple of books that come up, and a lot of people just say these books are really hard. Romans and Revelation. You have something you have published on the book of Revelation that can really be helpful. Tell us about that.
Several years ago, while I was doing graduate work at ACU, I had the opportunity to take a class in intertestamental apocalyptic literature. Wow, that is a significant mouthful, isn't it? And that may not be real exciting to everybody, but this is the book that was born out of that Bible class. That class was about coming to understand the kind of material that apocalyptic literature is, the type, the genre, I think is the word that I'm looking for there. And we've done a lot of work in other parts of the Bible in genre and understanding types, and that really is helpful to us. For example, we know something of the kind and types of New Testament letter writing. I'm talking about even letters outside of the New Testament. This is how people wrote letters in that time. We start with "Dear so-and-so" and work through the body of the letter and then sign, "Sincerely yours." Well, they had a form for that as well. And understanding that form helps us understand where the main part of the letter is. And for example, in Galatians, when Paul writes that letter to the churches in Galatians, he skips the thanksgiving. All of Paul's letters have that "I thank God for you" or "I'm thankful to the Lord." That was a big part of letter writing in New Testament days. Everybody did it that way. And so when Paul jumps that, there's no thanksgiving at all. We know right away that he is very upset and very wrought up about what's going on with the churches in Galatia. So understanding some things about the literature and the times is helpful. And I took that class at ACU because I wanted to understand, what did people in the New Testament think about or understand when they read apocalyptic literature with all those visions and beasts and battles? What did they expect from that kind of material? And what we did in the class was we just read a lot of that stuff. A lot of that stuff was written between the testaments, between Malachi and Matthew. It's not inspired, but it's helpful to set the stage for what the readers of the book of Revelation would have expected when they unrolled what John sent to them. And it says this is an apocalypse. They would think, oh, this is like that other stuff that we have read. This is going to work kind of like this other stuff. Just as much as when you open an email from Nigeria and it promises you $24 million in an unused bank account, you know the type that is going on there, and you know how to respond to that, or maybe in that case not to respond to that. So when you read a lot of intertestamental apocalyptic literature, you get a better understanding of what's going on in the book of Revelation. You come to see that it's not nearly as weird or scary as we think it is. In fact, compared to lots of the material that was floating around in the first century, it's not very high on the weird and scary scale at all. And And so that just really helped me to have a better appreciation for what the Holy Spirit is doing through John's pen in the book of Revelation, how Revelation functions, things not to do with apocalyptic literature, like try to use it as a calendar or date setting device. And so I began to put those thoughts together, and I would use them when I was teaching and preaching, and did some preacher Bible studies, try to help people better understand the kind of material that Revelation is and the expectations of that material in the first century. And ultimately, I ended up coalescing that material into a book to try to get that to the broadest possible audience.
Thank you, Mark. Let's go to a completely different kind of book. Tell us about Evelyn's Lighthouse.
Well, that is a really different kind of book because that's a fiction book that I wrote with my niece, Patience Clevenger. My wife and I love to visit lighthouses, and we were in Minnesota on a lighthouse collecting trip, and we got to go to Split Rock Lighthouse. There's a picture of Dina and I at Split Rock. Split Rock is one of the nation's most famous lighthouses for obvious reasons. It's sitting on top of a 130-foot tall cliff on Lake Superior. 54-foot lighthouse there just affords a spectacular view of the lake and is a truly marvelous and beautiful, beautiful light station. And as Dina and I were touring there and walking around, I told Dina, I said, there needs to be a story here. This is an incredible location. There needs to be a story here. And I had a lot of things that I do with my nephew, Truth. We're really into sports and going to games and watching games and talking about sports. But I didn't have anything that at that time that I was doing with Patience, my niece. And so I came home and I knew she was interested in writing. And so I just talked to her and said, hey, how about we write a story set in the 1920s when the light station was built. And we'll write about a 12-year-old girl who lives at that lighthouse and her adventures and what goes on. And Patience thought that was a great idea. And she wanted, yeah, let's just do that. And so I would write a couple of chapters and I would bring them to church and hand them off to Patience, and she would edit them and say, you know, I don't understand this, or a 12-year-old girl wouldn't act like that and do this and this and this. And I kind of thought maybe at some point that the project would run out of gas. You know, sometimes kids get excited about something and then they just move on. And that would be okay. I just, wanted to find some connection points with my niece, but it never ran out of gas. We just kept writing and we got more interested in what Evelyn was doing at her lighthouse, and Patience was a tremendous help to me. And next thing you know, we had a mystery going on and something terrible is happening at the lighthouse, and can Evelyn solve the mystery and save the lighthouse? And we just need to see what she was doing. And we ended up writing the entire book and publishing it through Amazon. It was really, really a rewarding effort to get to do that writing with Patience.
That's great. Is that book not only available at Amazon, but do I remember that the gift shop there carried that book for a while?
We are talking with the gift shop there about carrying it. That's kind of got bogged down in some things, but yes, we think at some point they will carry it there, and we're kind of hopeful that we could get other lighthouse to carry it. Every lighthouse that's open to the public will have a little gift nook or a little gift shop, usually in the keeper's quarters, and they'll have some lighthouse knickknacks, and then they'll have some books about lighthouses and maps to lighthouses, but there's usually not anything for kids. And so we did great on the writing. Patience and I are not that great on the marketing end. I need someone to help me market that book so that it would get to a little broader audience.
Okay, we'll shift gears again. Pressing On magazine. Tell us about that.
Well, Pressing On is a Kindle and digital device journal that we put out once a month, and you can read on a tablet or laptop or your phone, your digital device. It comes as a result of me receiving a Kindle e-reader several years ago for Christmas, and fairly quickly I recognized that this is just an incredible device, and the ability to carry around hundreds of books. For somebody who's so addicted to reading, one of my great fears always is I'm going to finish the book I've got before I can get to the library and get another one. Well, now I didn't have to worry anymore. My Kindle makes sure that I have books with me at all times. And then I came to realize that you can send documents onto your Kindle and email stuff into your Kindle for yourself or to someone else. And so all of a sudden I realized that we could publish a Brotherhood journal without all the difficulties that come with publishing today: paper, printing, postage. Those big three cost lots and lots of money, and that makes journals expensive and has driven some magazines, secular and religious, out of business. So I decided, well, let's publish something onto the Kindle and onto digital devices. And I assembled myself a team of great writers. Warren is my assistant editor, and got some wonderful writers. Dee Bowman writes, Chuck Durham, Rusty Miller writes the only column I know of among brethren exclusively and specifically for shepherds, for elders. Doy Moyer does a great job. Denny Ward does a great job. Just some really, really fine writers. Wilson Adams writes a column every month. And you can get all of that and read that on the device of your choosing for $10 a year. I think it's one of the best kept secrets among brethren. 83 cents a month, you can have a 25-page paper, if you will, a bunch of pixels sent directly to you, and you can read material that will help you press on in your walk with the Lord.
And when is the next issue coming out?
That next issue probably will be coming out, well, as we're recording this right here at the end of May. I always try to get the issue, try to publish the issue a couple of days right before the end of the month. We always want people to have it either on the last day of the month or by the first day of the next month. So the issue is just about to go to press, and I'm proud to say we've been pressing on more than 6 years, and we have never been late. I'm kind of proud of that.
Jay?
That's good. Well, Mark, you have a new book on Romans coming out. Tell us something about that book.
Well, maybe this comes as a fascination with difficult books that start with R. I guess maybe the next book I have to write will be a book on Ruth, although I'm not sure Ruth fits the description of being difficult. Romans is a challenge. There's not any doubt about it. And this is a new book that I have coming out called Romans for Everyone. In my work as a preacher, I'm always preaching through a book of the Bible, a chapter at a time, once a month. And a couple of years ago, I got done with the book that I was preaching through, and the elders asked me if I would consider preaching through the book of Romans, which at the time pretty much terrified me and made me think about pulling out all of my hair. It's a big challenge, and there is no doubt that Romans has some deep water in it, without any question at all. But what I found was that I did not have time in one sermon on one chapter of Romans to beat out every false doctrine that's ever been taught from this passage or that passage, to chase every rabbit and to quote Luther and Augustine and John Calvin and then deal with all of their wrong thinking developed out of the book of Romans. All I could do was preach what Romans said, was let Paul be heard. And what I found, not surprisingly, is that when we let the Bible speak, it's just not nearly as hard to understand as maybe we think it is sometimes. I think sometimes it's all of this business of stomping out every wrong idea and chasing tangents and long discussions of this ism and that ism before we come back to the New Testament. I think sometimes that is what muddles up our understanding of Paul's original message. Nobody in Rome was a Calvinist when Paul wrote that great epistle. So when you take that approach to the book of Romans, it begins to lay out very neatly, and it begins to really come together and make sense. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's actually a theme that's being developed. It's not just some random kind of academic, esoteric ideas on salvation. Paul has some very specific ideas and some very specific points he needs to make to that church, because it's in a very specific situation that he is addressing. And an understanding of that, setting that book in its original context and saying, I want to sit with the Roman congregation when this book was being read. I want to hear it the way they heard it. Really, really makes a difference. And so that sermon series was very well received. There's my better half. There's Miss Dina, and that's Carson, my Scotty dog. And he played a big role in this book because that sermon series was well received, but I wasn't sure how to make it into a book. And I wanted that material to come together in a book, but I just wasn't really sure exactly how to do that. Was I writing a commentary? Was I writing a devotional? What was going on here? And one night I was walking Carson, and Carson has short legs and Scotty dogs walk very slowly, and that gives you lots of time to think. And so I was doing some thinking about the book, and it occurred to me that what people would really like is to go to like a local coffee shop and order some coffee and pull up some comfortable chairs and just read through the book of Romans and maybe have someone there who could kind of guide them and help them understand some things that are working in Paul's themes and help them get over some of the rough spots, but mostly hear what Romans says and drink some good coffee. And as I got to thinking about that, I just got to thinking about a coffee shop Bible study, a group of people reading Romans in a coffee shop. And that's when it came together. I guess I owe Carson for the book. And I thought, you know what, that's what I'm going to write. I'm going to write a book for people who are reading Romans over a good cup of coffee or maybe a Dr. Pepper or a cup of tea, whatever it is that you enjoy, but just wanting to take a better look at this book and try to get both hands on it. It's a book that's challenged so many people. So that's how the book was written. That's how it came together. And I do have some notes in it about how to brew better coffee at home. And that's kind of gives it a little coffee flavor, kind of enjoy talking about coffee as we're working along through Romans. And that's how the book was written.
Well, we're looking forward to reading it. Tell us something about what you do with the kids at Westside in reference to C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis has been a big influence on me. His writing and thinking has just been something that has helped me so many times in so many ways. C.S. Lewis is someone that you can read over and over and over again, and you'll still find something on the next pass that you hadn't thought of before. So I appreciate his reading so much. He was a remarkable man. He was really a genius, and I enjoy all of his writings. He certainly is not inspired, and I certainly don't agree with everything that C.S. Lewis ever read or said, but he's been a great help to me. About 10 years ago, I started a summer reading program here at Westside for our kids to see if any of them wanted to read C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia. And not surprisingly, there were just a lot of kids who wanted to do that and who were very interested in doing that. There are 7 books in the Chronicle of Narnia series, and we read 1 book each summer. And how that works is, I assign the chapters. We'll meet 3, 4, 5 times, and I just break the book down into chunks. And you read these chapters, and then we come together and we talk about it, just like maybe you've been part of a reading discussion group for adults, like I was just talking about with Romans, and you read your chapters and you come talk about the book, the characters and ideas and what's working and how you felt about it and do you like it and all that kind of thing. And that's what we do with the Chronicles of Narnia. We get together and we talk about what we read and make sure that they understand it, make sure they see what Lewis is trying to help them understand, particularly because those books have spiritual themes and spiritual truths in them. They're not just for kids. The Chronicles of Narnia are great for adults as well. And I've actually done the Chronicles of Narnia, done The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe with our adults here at Westside as well, because they were kind of jealous. They said, hey, when do we get to do some of that? And those are amazing books because they tell stories in a powerful way. Jesus used stories. Stories in some ways are more memorable than kind of a dry doctrinal discourse. And Jesus told parables that really helped people understand about the kingdom of God. And C.S. Lewis harnesses the power of stories in the Chronicles of Narnia. And kids love that, especially if they have access to someone who's going to help them understand why this character is doing this, or maybe some of the British language and vocabulary that's a little unfamiliar to kids today. And of course, usually at the end, we'll watch one of the movies. Some of the Disney movies from the Chronicles of Narnia are just pretty terrible. They've gone all kinds of ways and taken liberties and changed the story up as if you could improve on C.S. Lewis. So sometimes we end up watching, there's a BBC production, and we'll end up watching the BBC productions of those. But it's always great after we've read through the book and talked about the book and worked in the book, and then we're watching on the screen and the kids will start, shouting, that's not in the book. Oh, that's not how that happens. And it's neat to see the kids learn that books are always better than movies. And so we always start with the book, and I don't let the kids watch the movie until we're done. And then they can see it in their mind's eye. That's how books are supposed to work.
Thanks, Mark. One of your greatest passions is daily Bible reading. You talk to young preachers about it, you do it yourself, and at Westside, you folks are really involved in daily Bible reading. Talk to us about that.
Daily Bible reading is such a significant and vital part of discipleship, and it's really the only thing that I can think of, or one of the few things, I guess, that I can think of that I can recommend without reservation. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, whether it's a movie or a book or something you saw on the internet. We're always having to say, well, I didn't agree with that, or, except for this one scene. But, the Bible is for everyone, for all times and all places, and you can recommend it without any reservation. If you're not a Christian, you should read the Bible. If you're a new Christian, you should read the Bible. If you're an old Christian, you should read the Bible. If you're a kid, you should read the Bible. If you're an adult, you should read the Bible. We should all read the Bible. And we have, as you said, done a lot at Westside to help our people stay with daily Bible reading. You're looking there at a screenshot from our website, justchristians.com, and you're seeing the different Bible reading plans that we have developed to help people have interest in Bible reading and to want to read God's Word. It seems like a lot of times when we're talking about daily Bible reading, it's something that the preacher maybe preaches on January 1st. We hand out Bible reading schedules. And then, of course, we say nothing else about it. And by the first week in February, people are 8,000 chapters behind, and the Bible reading schedule is lost somewhere in the backseat of the car, and nobody's doing it anymore. And so what we have found is that you need to do various things to help people stay in touch with that and to stay on top of that. And so we do some things like that. I produce a video usually on Fridays, reading one of the chapters from the Bible reading, do some preaching sometimes from our Bible reading, the scripture reading that begins our assembly, our 1040 worship assembly will be taken from that week's Bible reading, and the man that's reading will say, this week in our Bible reading, we'll be reading from Ecclesiastes chapter 2. This morning's Bible reading is from Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Or maybe the man at the Lord's table will say it in the table talk. Last week in our Bible reading, we read from Psalm 22, and I want to say some things about that to prepare our minds to take the Lord's Supper. We do a number of other things as well, but we're just always keeping Bible reading in front of people, and we help them see the value and the importance of that. Bible reading needs to be doable. We like to read at a pace of about one chapter a day, 5 days a week. That's doable. People can do that. I wish people would read 50 chapters a day, 7 days a week. But if those kinds of schedules, people will flake out. And there needs to be a lot of effort made to, a lot of emphasis on how to understand the Bible and how to apply the Bible. I think sometimes preachers assume that our people are bridging from the world of today back 2,000 years or even further into the Bible, and that they're able to see what happened there and then say, oh, this is what that means for me today. And that's not always the case. And if people can't do that, then Bible reading becomes meaningless. It's just an academic exercise. I'm doing it. I know I'm supposed to do it, but I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm not getting any benefit from it. But when it's doable and when it's understandable, when people are encouraged and it becomes part of the church's culture to do it, it begins to grow their discipleship. And then, of course, people want to do it. They see the value in doing that. Now, we never measure, did you read all of it? We never set the standard of 100% of the readings. And we, lots of times I will just say, if you are behind in your reading, let that go. Don't worry about that. Jump in where we are now. In fact, this week we're finishing the second book of Psalms through Psalm 72. The book of Psalms is a collection of 5 books of Psalms. And so on Monday, we will start the book of Ecclesiastes. And Sunday, I will tell folks, hey, we're starting Ecclesiastes. If you're behind, let it go. Don't worry about that. Dive in with us now. Just climb in with us right where we are. So all those kinds of things contribute to a culture of Bible reading. And it's taken a long time to build that. That's not something you can do overnight. But Westside is absolutely the most Bible reading church that I've ever been a part of. It's just delightful and wonderful to see. And it helps Christians be what the Lord wants us to be. It's really, really a joy to be a part of daily Bible reading like that.
Well, you've made it doable. And I think one of your elders, Rusty Miller, does something. What does he do to plug that? Is it on Twitter?
Rusty's on Twitter, Rusty's on Twitter every day, and he'll tweet out a summary of today's Bible reading, the chapter that we read today. So he'll send that out. And then his second tweet, he will actually send out some kind of application from that. And you can follow him on Twitter at Miller24Rusty. And so he's tweeting about our Bible reading, and that keeps people involved in it. That's reposted onto our Facebook page for our, the Westside family, so that they can see that if you're not on Twitter. And then, like I said, I'm doing a video on Friday. Sometimes on Monday, we'll start the week with Bible reading. And that keeps people's feet wet. That keeps people going. And just need to do a lot of things. Preachers who think they can preach on Bible reading January 1st, and then everybody just, okay, now I'm just going to do it for the rest of the year. You know, doesn't exactly work like that.
For our viewers, everything we've talked about, the books and Bible reading plans like the one that Mark has produced each year, all that will be in the links that accompany this video. So everything we've talked about, we'll have a link to it in connection with this video. Mark, we are really appreciative of your taking the time to be with us on this interview program, and we hope to get you back sometime.
Well, Warren, I appreciate it very much. You and I have been friends for a long time. We've done all kinds of things and gotten into all kinds of trouble together. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it very, very much. If people are interested in some of my books, as you said, there'll be links there. And I'm trying to kind of revive. I have Mark Roberts' blog is my website. I haven't really done a whole lot there. I'm going to try to get my books there so people can have a place to track some of that. Or you can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter, and continue to write and think about books and to think about reading. I appreciate the work that you and Jay are doing here.
Thanks, Mark. We appreciate it. This has been All About Books, this episode with Mark Roberts. All the links will be accompanying this video. We'll see you, folks. Bye.